My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your F.A.T.E. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. How's everybody doing today? On today's show, I have Brooke Deanne. She is a survivor of a religious cult. She is now out there helping others heal from their own trauma. She's a rapid transformation therapist. She's an NLP practitioner. She has a new book out called Shattered, Broken, and Beautiful that chronicles her spiritual awakening and her leaving of her cult church. I'm very excited to have her on the show and hear her journey. Brooke Deanne, welcome to your F.A.T.E, my friend. How you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Me too. We didn't have the same journey, but I identified a lot with your story because I kind of came up in a very not as intense or as an extreme situation as you did, but a similar arena of growing up in a church. I grew up Church of Christ, and a lot of people say that Church of Christ is a cult, and I tend to agree with them. So I really resonated a lot with some of your experiences when it came to dealing with your upbringing, how you were treated, how you felt. But I always like to start from the beginning. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, how it began, and how you realized that you needed to escape from the cult that was your church or your home for so many years growing up. So,
Yeah, you gave me a great lead in, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. Obviously, I was born into this. I'm a third generation, Jehovah's Witness, now ex-Jehovah's Witness. And it was very instilled in me from birth who I was meant to be, how I was meant to act, what my belief system was. I didn't really have a choice. And as a child, you don't think anything different, right? You trust your parents. You think that your parents are giving you the right information, and they thought they were giving me the right information, right? It was all they also ever knew. So it's about being able to see that growing up this way, didn't know anything different. So it's not surprising that I stayed in the cult for as long as I did. I mean, I didn't leave until 2017. So I was almost in for 36 years of my life. So that's a long period of time to have a lot of indoctrination, a lot of programming, a belief system. And as I grew up in this system, you really were expected to continue to strive to always do better. So it always felt like you were not enough. As well, my father kind of made me feel that way as well. He was very narcissistic, and he wanted to present the family to be the best spiritual example. So I played the part. And if I didn't play the part, as I grew older and I became more rebellious and I wanted to kind of break free out of this like mold and or cage that they were trying to keep me in, that rebellion like made my father furious because he wanted to control. And so that led me to want to kind of break out of that mold. And it really got me trapped into an abusive relationship. It was like a carbon copy of my father. And I stayed in that for 17 years. So it just kind of shows a little bit about the fact that, our upbringing really molds us into who we are today and can keep us in relationships that we don't belong in. And, this is the part of the story, that obviously that you read it, that I like to emphasize for people, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And it's about being curious and seeing, okay, what's not working in my life and why?
100. Another thing that I found, just talking about church in general, the the judgment that you had to undergo, not only from your peers within the church, from the elders that were there, that were in the church, but from your own parents. Your own parents were so programmed, they were never going to give it up, ever.
Mhm.
And I think that's what struck me most, is that I felt when I read your story that, and I guess people are told this, that even their own child, I felt that the church became was before you. That's, the church was before their own children. Your happiness, how you felt about yourself, none of that mattered. It felt to me when I was reading the book that, yeah, and it's one of the things that I kind of got lucky with my parents, a little luckier, because my mom kind of pumped the brakes on
Mhm.
that kind of overwhelmingly judgment. She grew up under my grandmother, who was extremely religious, who was all hellfire brimstone. Same fear of having others judge us in the church if we weren't sitting in the pews on Sunday.
Mhm.
All the time, my mom was faking sick on Sundays. All the time. So so we didn't go to church. She would make any excuse at some point for us not to go there. And it it really speaks to how easily programmed human beings are into completely foregoing their own wants, needs, desires in order to fit into a mold that they feel that they have been taught is the only mold that you can be in.
Mhm.
It's it's fascinating. At what stage in your journey did you start really understanding that this was a cult situation and that this wasn't normal? This wasn't a normal church experience where you're going to church on Sunday, and lots of millions of people do that every single Sunday that I don't think would describe themselves as being in a cult.
Mm.
What made your experience different than others?
So, I always had these little feelings, even as I grew up. I had questions. I always kind of was like, these things don't really make sense. And one of those beliefs was around how Armageddon and what happened after Armageddon. It was a very apocalyptic belief system. So it's always like doom and gloom. And, we had a belief that God would not come and destroy everybody at Armageddon. And there would be a paradise on earth for the people that were Jehovah's Witnesses or the righteous people that God deemed acceptable. And I always questioned this. Even as a young child, I would go to my father, I would ask him these questions. There was something in there that just wasn't thinking and wasn't making sense to me. Because I was like, well, we're just like this small community of people, and there's like so many people in the world. Like this, just, something wasn't adding up for me. So I always had like this little intuitive nudge that was always kind of saying, this doesn't resonate. This doesn't make sense. But I didn't actually break free until my then husband came to me and expressed to me all the things that he had discovered about the cult and all of the untruths and the things that we had been taught were actually so profoundly wrong historically. Like he had done deep research historically about the origins of Jehovah's Witnesses, the biblical texts that they were kind of stating that was true, but actually they just kind of misinterpreted and made fit into their doctrine. And
Yeah.
then he explained to me that he found a slew of child sex abuse cases that had been covered up for over 50 years from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I mean, this is no surprise. It's all over the internet. In 2016, the Australia Royal Commission really showed this fully, like you can watch it online right now on YouTube, of these sex abuse cases that were being covered up by the witnesses. And the people that lead the witnesses were actually lying from the stand. And so when he showed me these things and I began to look at these things, I reacted just like I had been programmed to. I told him that he had been possessed and there was something wrong with him. He was crazy. He had lost his mind. And it's like, you need to go to the elders. You need help. You need healing. Like I was literally just doing everything that I've been programmed to do as a Jehovah's Witness. And he kept telling me, no, just, you gotta look, you gotta keep digging. And the more that he did that, the more I started to be like, okay, there must be something here. I'm just gonna stop. I'm gonna let all of that go aside and I'm gonna be afraid, but I'm actually gonna be curious here. And when I did that, it really opened up my mind.
Wow. I mean, what's up with the abusing kids in the church? Look at
I
the
know.
you guys. Look
It's
at
just
that
testing.
happened all over in the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
It's all over. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And the other thing I will say is when that's exactly what first illuminated me to the fact that this is all just crap was when my preacher used to say we were the only ones that were going to heaven and
Mm.
everybody else was going to hell. And I was like 9 years old thinking to myself, that doesn't really make sense to me. There's like the same exact line of logic that you're like, there's millions of people on this planet, and we are the only ones that are special and going to this place that they're calling. Like, it didn't make any sense. Still, there's millions of people that believe their religion is the only right religion. It's one of the biggest, I think,
Hopes. It's a hope.
glowing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's like the biggest sign out there is that every single religion thinks they're the only religion that matters and that they're the only ones going to heaven and they're saved and everybody else is sinners and going to hell. That is a thread that weaves through every religion out there that we have on the planet. And if that is not the biggest indication that it's all about control, then it's all about manipulating and it's all about programming. I don't know what is.
I agree
I
with
mean,
you.
you know, I'm certainly not an atheist anymore, and I believe in God's source and higher energy 100%. But I also know that there are many pathways to your spiritual awakening. There's many pathways to God. There's not one way. All of that is it's just fascinating. What about what about now? Are you in do you go to church? Do you have an did you change religions? Y- are what category are
Yeah.
you are you putting
I love
yourself
it.
in these
I love it.
days?
Yeah, I would not categorize myself whatsoever, but I would much like you, it sounds like you probably had a journey of kind of becoming an atheist after you left your church.
Yes.
And I think that's a
Yes.
big story from a lot of people that leave high control religion or cult like systems that we kind of really just kind of feel betrayed. And that was what I did. I felt very betrayed and felt like very angry. I'm like, well, if there was a God, why did he lie to me? Like, why did I like get duped
Mm,
and get born into this? And so I felt like I just didn't want to touch any of that stuff. So I kind of put myself in denial. Like, don't look at this,
mm,
just throw this to the side, don't even experience this. But I really, really ignited my own spiritual awakening when my ex-husband died in 2020 from an overdose. And that kind of awakened me to, okay, that's grief and watching my children grieve and kind of just witnessing this in myself. I really wanted to know, well, where is he? Like, what is happening? And I wanted to know more. It left me with so many questions that I still was like, well, I had this full belief system and I completely wiped it out. Now I don't know what to believe. And so it felt like the more that I asked, the more answers that I received. And it started to resonate with me. I started to understand things in a different way and have that own connection to, as you said, God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it, the higher connection with higher power. Um, Seeing how it does play out in your life and having that connection is right here, right now. A lot of people think
yeah.
we need to go to church to find that. And I don't believe that. I feel
Yeah.
like it's right here. It's within you. You're able to access it at any time that you need to. It's your inner knowing. It's your inner guidance system. It's
Yes.
that connection that you have to the love within you. And
Yeah.
how this guidance system is always leading you to become the best version of yourself. And I really think that's the ultimate path for myself. And it just is now more of, I don't need to fit in a box. I don't need to be in a religion. I don't need to call myself anything. I just know my truth.
Have you healed your parents' relationship yet? What is the status of, in the book, it seemed like it ended without not a lot of healing taking place, but maybe I'm wrong. What is the status of your family life now?
So unfortunately, there is none. I'm been estranged from my parents for about 4 years. They really took, as you said, they really put their God first. They put their religion first, and the family really comes second. And you're taught that within the cult. They really nail that into your brain that this is what comes first is Jehovah. And if your family leaves Jehovah, you discard your family. Like they're no longer your family. Like you cut them off. And so that is what they have chosen to do. And in a lot of ways, it was emotionally more healthy for me. Even though it was painful, right? There was a grieving process. I still go through that grieving process. But at the same time, it was emotionally healthy for me to not have anything to do with them because they couldn't separate their religion and their relationship to their daughter. They could, it was like they can't see me the same way. They treat you differently. It's very abusive. And so it was a healthy thing for me, even.
Yeah. It's terribly sad situation because it seems as if your church does set it up in a way that it completely you are isolated from the exterior world. You are not allowed to even interact with people that are or correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it is looked down upon for you guys to even really interact with somebody that is not within your belief system or within the church or in good standing of the church. So you're not even supposed to have a lot of relationships with people that are not in your religion. And to me, if that doesn't scream control, manipulation, another huge red flag. And I think that they use fear. I think all religions use fear. It's one of their easiest techniques that they use to get you to behave, to stay in line. Fear of going to hell. The fear of losing your tribe was intense for you.
Yeah.
You talk in the book about you had relationships within the church and you had, but they were all relationships that were very almost transactional or based on um, if you were in good standing with the church, it was all high fives and butt slaps. If you were not in good standing in church, like, they couldn't give you the time of day, so you literally had to, like, walk this fine line of, um, being trying to keep yourself in good standing with everybody in order to maintain your friendships even in the church. People that you had known for years would turn their back on you in a heartbeat. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said you're isolated. So it's very,
Yeah.
cult like systems are the same as being an abusive relationship. I often compare them because they're so similar, right? In an abusive relationship, that person wants to isolate you from the outside world because why? Because they're easier to control. They don't want to feel out of control. And it's the same thing with the cult. Cult was like, how can we isolate our members? Well, we tell them from the podium over and over and over again, they cannot hang out or associate with anybody what they call in the world. So we would call the outsiders worldly people. We would not be able to hang out with them. We wouldn't be able to, have a dinner with them. We kept ourselves separate from the world. We literally took that biblical scripture so literal. And so we weren't allowed to do those things. And I always was like, gosh, I just want to like hang out with, when I was a teenager, I just wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to make friendships outside of the world because it felt like it was more free. And I always desired that. But it was unfortunate because the people that were in the religion also, it was transactional. So if you were doing good, if you were showing up to the church and you were coming on a regular basis, you were in good standing. And if you weren't, people barely looked at you or talked to you. You weren't invited to events. You weren't allowed to like be a part of the system, if you will, and you felt like an outsider. So it is why it's felt like it's why it's created like that, because it makes you want to go so that you're in the community, because we're human and we are innately wanting to be within tribe and community. So we're going to try our hardest to be included. And it was a perfect system to be set up that way.
The other thing that I feel is a thread that runs in a lot of churches is this feeling of superiority over your worldly people. Like even when I thought was an interesting tidbit when you guys, because Jehovah Witnesses, everybody knows they walk around, they'll knock on your door and they'll invite you in and give you information and all that stuff. But you talk a little bit about in the book about how you're all lovely dovely to these people trying to give them information. And then you walk away laughing at them because they are not of the chosen ones. And this sense of superiority over other people was rampant in not only your church, but I think that happens in a lot of churches, this feeling that you are somewhat better, this judgmental aspect that reigns in the church that you're going to heaven and you're chosen by God and other people aren't, is I feel like one of the biggest mind beeps that you could ever be in.
Yes,
Yeah.
completely. It in one of the narcissistic elements of it is like how
Yeah.
the men carry themselves within the religion, because they basically tell you that the men are superior over the women. The women are meant to be submissive to the husband, to the leaders of the religion, and that's it. That's your place as a woman. You don't get to do all the things the men do. Your place is to raise the children, be submissive to your husband, and do as you're told. Like, you are meant to stay small and quiet. And so I think the superiority piece is, yeah, we weren't taught to be judgmental. We looked down on other people. And I love that you said that, because we did. We would go and we would preach, but yet we were the most judgmental people in the world. It was not about love. It was about, oh, you don't have the real truths. You don't even know. You don't even know. We know something you don't know. You poor thing, you. Like, we looked down on everybody. Yeah, it was really, honestly, it was disgusting and it was almost embarrassing to talk about, but it is the reality of how each and every witness is taught to act. And we had inflated egos, thinking that we were chosen by God and we were going to be saved, and that we were the only ones.
I mean, it's a threat. It's not only your religion. I see it all the time out there. And I find it so amazing how easily people are able to compartmentalize their own little thoughts and think they're all godly and good inside and God loves them. And yet they're the most horrifying, judgmental, will crucify your ass if you don't belong to their church. Like those two pieces don't really, nobody seems to be able to understand that there's no alignment there with being a good holy person and then on the other side of the coin
Yeah.
just land it's just it's cognitive dissonance at its finest, ladies and gentlemen,
Yes.
like and it always amazed me how little people were even they don't see it in themselves. I used to see it in my own sister all the time. My sister would say all these like words that she felt like she was such a loving and not judgmental person. She was very much in the Church of the Christ.
Mm.
And I just had her on the show recently. I've had her on a couple of times because we were very strained for many years because I was an atheist and she was very Church of Christ. You can only imagine how, you know, bad that was for many, many years. And it's only been in the last 4 or 5 years where she's released her religious, I would say, I wouldn't maybe say a cult, but I would say extreme religious views, very, very,
Mm.
very religious. And I've stepped into my spirituality and I've completely transformed. But I've been seeing it my whole life within the church dynamic, this ability to say something and truly believe it and then act the entirely opposite of what you think you are. It is remarkable. I've seen it my whole life, and I'm always like, is like to be in your brain because like I don't get it, man. The other thing that I totally align with you and one of the many reasons why I push back on the church is this male dominance thing that happens in the church. Women can't lead song, women can't be elders, women can't give communion, women can't be the preachers, women have to be subservient to men. That is, I think, one of the most detrimental things out there about religion to this day. And that also exists in many religions out there, this dominance of the male patriarchy. I think that's heading towards the dustbin of humanity, in my opinion. I don't think they're trying to make a comeback. I know.
Like, I'm
I
hopeful.
don't think we're never going to be able to like put the cork back in the bottle. Women are out. We're here. We're
Mhm.
not going anywhere, you know?
I agree.
Um, let's talk a little bit about how you were able to heal from this experience and what your journey for spiritual awakening was.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I'm still on that healing journey. I don't think that ever ends.
Yeah,
It's always just
agreed.
more evolving. But I really realized when I left my abusive relationship and I left the cult, I immediately knew I needed help. I had extreme anxiety. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I was just barely like hanging on by a thread because I was just really struggling. I'd lost my whole identity. I lost everything I'd ever known. And it was just, I was struggling. So I got therapy. I began that process. And while it was helping me, I really felt like traditional talk therapy was kind of just like hitting my head up against a wall. It was like, okay, I'm not really going anywhere with this. Like you're giving me some tools, but I was really, really struggling. And then when my ex died, that's when it really kind of ignited me even more. Like, okay, I really need to dive into this. I need to find the tools that are going to really help support me through this process. And that's when I just felt like the teachers and the mentors kind of showed up in my world. And it was other modalities than just traditional talk therapy. It was hypnotherapy, what I do, RTT. It was Reiki, it was somatic experiencing, it was psychedelics. It was all of these things that were helping me to access a different version of myself and really remove like all the masks I had worn throughout the years, and feeling small because, if anyone has been abused for many, many years, the one thing is your body keeps the score. Like it remembers every moment of fear, every time you were hit, every time that you were treated wrong, and it holds on to all of that. And so I just felt myself always kind of living in the past, even in the present moment. I would think something was happening in my reality, but it was really something from the past that was just being triggered. And if anybody has lived in that, they understand the fear and the anxiety that kind of rises and knows that there's, oof, this is uncomfortable. And is there something here I need to dig deeper? And so I just kind of continued to do that inner work. And it has helped me to become more present, to be able to really hold space for people and
Yeah.
help them in their own suffering. And I feel like I walked that path of pain to be able to help people to kind of get there in a quicker, faster way so they didn't have to fuck.
I often say on this show that most everyone has to be shaken to awaken,
Mhm.
go through some sort of traumatic event that is able to unlock your pre programmed mind and expand your consciousness and allow you to grow. And unfortunately, it seems like for the human condition, growth is painful.
Yes, it is.
You know, growing is painful. I have a similar, shakening. Mine wasn't through a religious cult and abusive relationships. Mine was a health crisis, but it allows you to start expanding your mind. I too went on plant medicine journeys and got
Mhm.
into energy healing, and it opens yourself up to understanding we are more than we think we are. There is more going on than we think, that we are very much programmed from the time we're very young to believe certain things that just aren't true. And we're not nearly as limited in our capacity as we're taught we are. And as I'm on, and I'm still healing and growing and expanding and doing the whole thing. And this podcast has been a true gift for me because it has allowed me to really talk to the most interesting people and learn so much about spirituality and just expand my mind. And I'm hoping I'm doing it for other people out there, you know. But it really has been such a gift to be able to talk to people about their own spiritual awakenings. And almost everybody has this traumatic event that ignites their moment where they start searching for more than what we think we are. And once you start searching, I think the universe kind of like says yes, and things come into your life, people come into your life. Like you said, mentors come into your life. I think when you align with that kind of thought intention, the universe says yes. Let's go. Let's do it. Um let's see. So what are you doing now to help people deal with their own religious trauma? Lots of people out there have religious trauma,
Mhm.
um, relationship trauma. All there's all kinds of emotional issues that people are dealing with, especially in today's climate. And even the cult thing, you can make an argument that there's a cult thing happening in our society today. You could make that argument. But what are you doing to help people heal?
Yes. So I do a lot of deep work with women and men one-on-one with RTT therapy, which is accessing the subconscious mind through hypnotherapy. I'm trauma informed, so I'm a trauma coach, but I really help people to access, what is keeping them stuck? What in the past has hurt them, wounded them, whether it be their family, their upbringing, and traumatic events, relationship, or religion that has caused them to disconnect from themselves. So I do it from a very holistic approach. I always say it's like mind, body, spirit. We got to start from the foundation. Where's your nervous system on? What's going on within you that is limiting you from actually living your best life? Because that was so my story. I was doing all the healing work, was doing the sessions, I was going to therapy, but my nervous system was dysregulated. I couldn't heal with this dysregulated nervous system. So it was like I was limiting myself. I was really blocking myself from doing the deeper healing work because when you're dysregulated, you can't access the emotions that are needing to be felt. You end up
Yeah.
bypassing them or avoiding them or, completely deterring yourself from actually doing more real deeper healing. And so my work is not, I don't like to, it's not surface work. This is deep foundational shadow work where we're going into the depths and we're getting, into the grit of where you are stuck. And
Yeah.
that's what I really love doing because that's what I had to do for myself. I had to claw myself out and I want to show everyone how to do that to get to the root cause. And so it has been awful work and it is transformation.
I mean, they do say that all healers have healed themselves at one point, you know. In order to heal others, you have to learn how to heal yourself. So what about advice for other people that are maybe they wouldn't be maybe they wouldn't call themselves that they're in a cult. Maybe that they are in a situation which I think is just as damaging, where they are living in fear, where they're living in shame, where they're feeling guilty about doing things, where they're seeking approval constantly from a congregation. It's like an abusive relationship, isn't it? But I feel like there's a lot of people out there that feel hopeless, lost, and going back to their abuser for more because they feel this programming, this pull. It took you, what did you say, 17 years to get out? Like,
17 years.
what is your advice for people that are in this situation that don't know what to do, where to go, or how to feel about it even? Maybe they have interior feelings and they're like, I don't even know what to do with these feelings, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it takes up to 7 times for a woman to leave her abuser. And that is also for a man as well. But women are more prone to staying longer because we're naturally caretakers. So for some reason, we have, and I find this in the collective, I find this in every woman I work with, they believe in some way they're responsible for this man. Something happened within the relationship and they think they're responsible for this man because they were taught from their conditioning and their modeling that they didn't have to have boundaries and that they had to take on other people's emotions and feelings and that they're responsible for taking care of other people. And so this leaves women really staying within these systems. So even if something bad really happens and they leave, the majority of them go back 7 times, which is crazy. I for myself did the same kind of behavior. And so I just see this in women. So I always tell everyone, get support. Your friends and your family are not your support system. They don't know the logistics or the psychological stuff that happens in these type of relationships. And you need to have someone that knows what is really going on to help you see clearly because you can be very confused. You can feel very torn because what you talked about earlier, the cognitive dissonance that comes up in these type of relationships is so real because you have a belief about the one version of the man that you know, and then you see the other version of the man that you know, and our mind can't hold conflicting beliefs. And so it's really hard to make sense. So I always tell people, get support, whether that's me or you find someone that knows what they're doing, get the support that you need because I promise you it's going to help you see more clearly and get through what you need to get through. I,
Yeah.
as a trauma response, didn't go and get support right away. And man, I look back now and I say, oh, wow, I would have had such an easier, I don't know, path if I would have just done that from the
Yeah.
beginning. So that's why I would give
Yeah.
everybody that advice.
It's at the end of the day, probably everything that was supposed to happen to you
Happen.
happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen for so many reasons. I look at that as my own experience too. I always think to myself, why did this have to happen to me? And why didn't, because I've had health problems now for a long time, but I really am starting to just surrender to the fact that I must have chose this somewhere in my soul contract, and this is what's supposed to happen to me, and this is why I had my spiritual awakening, and just surrender to the process. At the end of the day, I'm starting to look at my life like this is just, you know, an experience. I am a spiritual being having a human experience, and I try to detach emotionally now from my symptoms, from anything else that's going on, and start asking questions like, what is this trying to teach me? Why is, what is spirit trying to tell me here? And it's how I'm starting to navigate life now with my um, newfound ways of my new perspectives on spirituality. In your journey, have you honed in on any kind of clairs? Do you have any spidey senses? How did that get any downloads? How is that going for you?
I love them. So that all really got ignited actually with my spiritual awakening after my ex-husband died. I really opened up to that completely. And I didn't really know what was happening to me because, again, I came from the belief system that psychic abilities are very demonic, like Satan's work. That's what we're taught in the religion. So
Yeah.
when that really opened up and I started to have visions, I started to have premonitions, I started to know things before I was supposed to know things. I started to be like, what is happening to me? Like I genuinely felt kind of go a little cuckoo. But at the same time, I was just realizing, okay, something else is going on here. And sure enough, like we talked about, a teacher showed up to teach me these gifts, these psychic abilities. Because I was also realizing I had mediumship skills, able to have contacts, with the other side and how the other side come through me when I work with people. That'll often happen because it's part of the healing work. It's part of helping people have access to people they've lost and they're grieving and they're, distraught. And that has been the work that I have been doing. So not only am I helping people heal, but I'm also using these gifts to be able to access what this person in particularly is needing. Like, what is their wound? I'm able to see it. I'm able to know exactly what it is and help them to guide them through the process by using these abilities.
That I'm really hoping. I mean, I meditate. I'm working on it, but like I'm really hoping that I at some point my mediumship skills show up. Like I would love to be more have a greater sense of intuition, a stronger sense of intuition. I
Mhm.
do believe that we all have some capacity to tap into that part of ourselves and develop it. And I'm hoping to continue to work on that. And I also believe that the reason why the church thinks it's demonic, even though I feel it's a natural part of who we are, we are eternal beings of light. Of course, we're magic. Of course, we can, speak beyond the veil. I think we're just absolutely 110% um, programmed from the day we're born and we go to school, that imagination that your special friends that kids have when they're growing up are not real. I feel like kids, because they're the freshest off the boat from spirit world, have very much intact spidey senses within that get beat out of them as we get older through schooling, through being scared to say it because people look at you. One of my friends had a near death experience when he was
Mhm.
very young, and he just told me, like, when I started this podcast, and I didn't know it, but he told his parents, and his parents ended up putting him in therapy because what he experienced after an accident. He said, "Hey, look, no, when you die, I was out of my body, I was having this and this." He was emotionally traumatized by it, and instead of getting support, they ended up telling him, he didn't know, you didn't really experience that. No, no,
Mm.
no. And now he's much older and he understands, I absolutely did experience that. And it's absolutely real. And he's a completely different person based on being able to accept that part of himself, if that makes sense,
Completely
you
makes
know?
sense. Yeah, it completely makes sense
So,
because that, in the spiritual awakening process, a lot of people are like, "Oh, that didn't happen to you." But you're like, "Well, no, I know
yeah.
it. I know it felt real. I know what exactly happened." And the near death experiences, that is what I started to kind of dive into when I was in my awakening process because I wanted to know more about the other side. And as I started to learn more about that, I kind of just said to the universe, send me someone that has had a near death experience. Like, have them show up. And sure enough, 3 days later, I had a woman come and lay on my table for a service. I used to be in the beauty industry. And she told me her near death experience unprovoked. And that's when I knew, okay, I got my answer. I got what I needed to hear and realize that, yes, these experiences are real. And just because we haven't had them doesn't mean that we're meant to judge them or question them.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think are the biggest signs out there that you are in a cult? What do you think are the biggest indications that, some churches are they can be extreme, but I'm not trying to paint every single church out there as a cult, you guys. That's not what I'm doing. But there are um very heavily controlled mechanisms that that live in all religions, it feels like. If you had to pinpoint a few things for people that, like, if this is happening, this is happening, and this is happening, you should really start evaluating where you're at and maybe taking steps to get yourself out of it emotionally and psychologically. What would those few things be for people to
Yes.
ting on?
Yes. First of all, and first and foremost, if that religion shuns those that leave, that is the biggest component of a cult-like system. So if anybody ever wants to learn more about cult, there's a man named Stephen Hossain, and he wrote the cult mind control, the bite model, or cult-like systems. And this is one that's included. So that means, like, if you actually shun people and actually abandon people after they leave, that's actual psychological abuse. So that will be your first indicator that you are in a cult. Your second indicator that you're in a cult is if you are told who you can hang out with, who you can, what you can wear, what you
Oh,
can
yeah. Didn't think.
watch. Yeah, what you can watch. These are all control tactics to keep you in a conformed system, right? Because they're wanting you not to look outside of them. They're wanting you to only read their literature, watch their stuff. And so they're trying to limit what you actually have access to. Another component of it is if you are being told that you're the chosen ones, and there really is, you're being told that you're the chosen one, that this is not love, right? I mean, this is just, you have to like kind of use your critical thinking skills and be like, okay, this sounds really crazy. Like, if you look at it and deep down, you can really say, okay, something's not right here. That would mean that God loves nobody else but this society. It just doesn't make sense. So I think there's a lot of things that, are big red flags, but those first two ones are really big ones because I had talked to so many people that didn't even realize that their quote unquote religion was a cult because of those two characteristics, but then realizing how much harm it did, even though they left, they just didn't know why they left. And it really is kind of this awakening process to realize, okay, I was being mind controlled, I was being brainwashed, and that it wasn't my fault. It just was, and especially if you were born into it.
Yeah. I, you know, I, I'm biased. I really am not a fan of organized religion in general. I'm just not. And I know a lot of people out there feel very strongly about their church and they have good community ties there. And I'm certainly not saying that every single church situation is negative or anything, but I do feel that most religions feel like they're the right religion and that there is any other, I mean, look what's going on in our world today with religions. Like, there's more people have died because of their religious beliefs than like, cancer or whatever. Like from the beginning of time, I feel like religion has something that has never brought peace, harmony, love. It's brought a lot of war. I mean, people like to think that Christians are like, oh, God fearing and God loving and, pious people. But like, look at what the Crusades did, like basically the government came along and like, tied people to trees and burned them if you were out healing people in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
they did terrible, terrible things to people to make Christianity Christianity rise up and be what it is today. It didn't rise on its own because of love and the profound messages that were given to us. It was forced upon people for a very long time and a lot of people died horrendous deaths because they were heretics or demons or witches or pagans or druids or we all used to worship nature. We used to be spiritual beings, you there's so much folklore out there where fays and fairy like different nature spirits, all these things that we used to be able to tune into and talk about and herbal medicine and all of that is grounded in our our true spiritual nature, that everything on this planet really is conscious and from God, from source. We're all here swimming in it together. I'm going to add a couple more things for your list that I saw that I like, oh, I'm going to say this. Um Here's another couple cult warning signs, folks. The leader is always right. Criticism or questioning the leader is seen as persecution and attack of the leader. Um, you weigh in anytime you want. Anything the leader does is justifiable, no matter how harmful it is. Um, Followers obsess over the leader and the group, resulting in the exclusion of all other consideration. There's another one. The leader, group, and those they endorse are the exclusive source of truth. No other sources are acceptable or credible. What do you think about that?
Those are all perfect and exactly true. Yeah. Because you're right. They are always right. We weren't allowed to question anything. And if we did, we
Yeah.
were disciplined. We were disciplined if we had questions. And we definitely were not allowed to do that publicly. We would have been disqualified. which means being outcast from the religion and kind of like having a slap on the wrist and no one can talk to you for a period of time until the elders decide that you can come back in.
I have to tell you, that was probably one of the most, um, like, it made me feel the most iggy is like when they would threaten that you would have to go in and sit down with the elders, and then the elders would have a little,
Mm.
discussion about whether or not you're going to be ousted or put in the penalty box or whatever they would like to call it, and you'd have to go and it's like you're a child. You were doing this when you were an adult. You were a grown ass woman having to go and sit in front of a panel of men, tell them your innermost whatever was going on, and then they had the power to judge whether you were in or out. And I found that to be, I mean, that would be humiliating for me if I had to do something like that. You must have felt a level powerless, shameful, embarrassed,
Mhm.
and pissed off. I would be so pissed if I had to go and justify my behavior to a panel of men. And who are they to judge me? What in the hell? Like I had a hard time reading that when I was reading that in your book because I
Mhm.
was like, this poor woman had to was made to feel less than for really like I read your book. You weren't doing anything that bad. You really weren't. You were like a normal. I did shit way worse than you ever would even like. I mean, I did way worse stuff than you could ever like. You felt very like you were navigating your life. I think that you knew that your interior felt like it was never fully on board with what you were having to do. You were always looking at the worldly world and thinking, I'm curious about that. I want to do that. I think you felt limited in expressing yourself and being who you were. But, like, it's not like you were out there robbing banks and, doing terrible things. You were just being a normal human being navigating life
Mhm.
and, being made to feel less than or that you should feel like you were going to hell or whatever, It must have been extremely difficult for you. I don't know if I had came down here with, like how you come down here with, like, inner knowings?
Yes.
I think I had an inner knowing that religion was bullshit. I just did from very beginning. And as soon as I got to be 14, 15, like I stopped going. Like I knew very young, this is not for me. I'm not doing this anymore. And I left. But I didn't have the repercussions because my parents accepted and loved me. And that was the one thing that stuck out for me with your parents. And when your parents pass, I guarantee you, your dad's going to come back to you and he's going to apologize for his behavior. I feel it for you. I know it. Like you're going to
Mhm.
have some sort of I don't you feel that way? Don't you I mean, I do. I was like, "Oh, when they pass, like
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
it's not hellfire brimstone and God definitely isn't standing there at the gates judging people. You can come in and you can't. You weren't good enough." That's not a thing, folks,
Yeah, I agree with that
you
completely.
know?
I think that's the truth too. I mean, I really, I don't know what to expect or to expect, to be honest, or how I'll receive that. But I think there is a space in this reality. This is the way it is, and there's a lot of acceptance. I think it's part of the grieving of losing people that are
Yeah.
still alive and,
Yeah.
kind of going through those grief cycles. But right now I'm in my acceptance phase, and maybe next
Yeah.
week I'll be in my anchor phase. I don't know. There's always there's the cycles that you may kind of go through. But I also can see that they believe they have no other choice. They believe it means their life.
Mm.
And when I look at it from that perspective, I don't make it mean anything about me because it's not me. It's
Yeah.
not about me. They can't see from anything other than their own perspective. And so it just kind of helps me just come to terms with it. And
Yeah.
realize I don't need to hold on to the anger or the hurt.
Yeah, and the other thing that I say that I have to keep remembering is that everybody has their own journey here. Not everybody is going to awaken. Not everybody is going to have that light bulb go off. And their journey is their journey, and it's not your journey, you know? It and who knows? So many things happen. Things could change. Life changes. You never know. Your parents or somebody along could come along and have their own awakening experience, or something strike them in a way, or maybe they have a dream, or maybe you could slip some ayahuasca or some mushrooms in their drink or something.
Yeah.
Something,
Yeah. I know. Don't tempt me with a good time. Yeah. I would love to do something like
you know,
that.
crack that noggin open and allow them to understand the nature of what we're really dealing with down here. Um, well, Brooke, it was a pleasure, man. Like I wish you nothing but love, light. I'm glad you're out there speaking out about your trauma, helping other people. I think more than ever, people like you need to be out there spreading your love and light, and letting people know they're not alone, and that there is life after the church, there's life after an abusive relationship, and that I'm kind of under the impression that a lot of good can come from trauma. Trauma is a lot of growth. It's a lot of inner healing. It can put you on a path that will really illuminate you to who you really are. So experiences are experiences, I'm finding, and that we identify them as good and bad experiences. But a lot of experiences are all just learning, growth, and expansion of our own consciousness down here. And I'm trying very much to understand that myself.
I resonate with everything you just
It,
said.
you know, um, how can people contact you if they're in a situation where they are in need of your assistance?
Yes. So they can find me on my website, lifecoachinggoddess.com. I'm also on all social medias as Life Coaching Goddess. And they can reach out to me there, and they can book a call, free chats. Whatever that is, I'm here to support.
And what about your book? When's your book coming out?
It's out. It's here. It was
It's
released
out. Okay, great.
Yep, it's March 25th. It was released. It hit #1 bestsellers, so I'm very excited about that. So,
Congratulations.
yeah. So if anybody wants to go and grab it, they can go grab it on Amazon right now.
All right. Well, I will put the link to your book in the show notes. I will put your website information. Say your website again, lifecoachinggoddess.com. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's it.
Lifecoachinggoddess.com. All right, guys. Brooke, you keep doing
Well,
you. I'm so glad you're out there in the world.
thank
You come
you.
back anytime, any kind of time you want to talk about religious cults, I'm down. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap on this episode of Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. Thank you, Brooke, for coming aboard. And we will see you next week, gang, on Fate. Journey well, everybody. Bye bye. And that is a wrap on this episode of Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. I want to thank Brooke Deanne for coming on and telling us her story. I think it's an important story. Um, I mean, I don't think I've made any bones about my feelings about organized religion on this show. And I know it's a delicate topic. I know that people are very emotionally connected to their religion. And I know that it can ignite feelings of anger. But at the end of the day, I do feel that some religious experiences are programming for the most part. And I don't think it programs us to be our best selves. It says it does. You know, if you ask any good Christian, I know that they'll think they're God fearing and they're loving and all of those things. But they're only really loving if you believe like they do, if you act like they do, if you have the same values that they do. I've just seen that thread run through every religion out there. They're not this come one, come all. be who you are, will love you no matter what type of places. Not that I've seen, experienced. I'm sure they exist. If you have a church out there that you go to that is an open door policy and doesn't have this incessant need to judge you, um, then good for you. I love that. I love that for you. And I say, continue your journey. And, it's your journey. But I don't find that to be the case in most of the circumstances when it comes to organized religion. I just don't. And I never heard of the Jehovah Witness child abuse scandal. I'm not shocked. I just feel like, what do they say? Like absolute power corrupts absolutely or something like that. There's a saying. I'm sure you know it better than I. But it's true. And that just isn't with church stuff. That's just in life, too much money, too much fame, too much power. It messes with you psychologically. I see it all the time in the movie industry when somebody gets very famous or a lot of money. It fucks with you. Sorry for my language for any of you sensitive folks out there, but I swear sometimes. Um, so, anyways, I think her story is important. And I think that if you're going to a church that makes you feel ashamed, guilty, um, fearful, like those are all signs that maybe you should start looking at alternative ways to fill that need. My experience is that people act a certain way in church and then they act another way when they're outside of church. And it's just a mask people put on and parade around to make themselves feel good in a lot of ways. And I hate to say that because I'm judging, myself. I am, but, you know, organized religion is just never going to be my thing. It never was my thing. It never will be my thing. I don't feel the need for that kind of community. I feel like there's so many paths to your own spiritual awakening and realizing who you are, what you're capable of, what this life on the earthly plane is. And it has nothing to do with going and sitting in a pew every Sunday. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but it doesn't. And that's my journey, though. That's my journey. I don't, I don't want to wade too far into the religious waters and turn people off the show because I know that everybody has their own opinions. My opinion is not the only one out there, that's for sure. And I'm not going to say my opinion is the only correct opinion out there. Is my opinion a version of the correct answer? In my opinion, yes. I don't think that your spirituality, being a good person and being an ethical person, having values, having morals, has anything to do with sitting your behind in a pew on a Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, or a Wednesday night, which is when I would have to go and sit in a church for the most of for my early years of life, 3 times a week. Um, I don't know, gang. I'm really hoping that with this great awakening that I feel is happening all around us now, and people are fed up with our old systems and they're fed up with what we have been taught that life should be and the expectations of what you should live as a life. I feel like a lot of that is getting thrown out and we're recycling into a new way. And part of that puzzle is going to be awakening to who you are and what the real nature of a reality is. And it has much more to do with energy, vibration, intentions, beliefs, and looking within. You're going to find a lot of the answers you seek by looking within. All right, well, the other thing I will say without wading too much into politics is I do feel like cult of personality is happening in America right now. And the divisions that we have in our world, in our country, are divisions that are purposefully put there. And I am hoping that people awaken to it and understand the game of what is afoot and how to play it better. And there is no right on this topic, it's perspective. And being able to have critical thinking skills, to not get so wrapped up in your emotions, and to always filter what's coming in to your brain is something that I cannot express enough the importance of. And that's all I'm going to say about that for right now. I am going to put all of Brooke's information in the show notes. Pick up her book, Shattered, Broken, and Beautiful. It's her journey of escaping her religious cult, her abusive husband, and finding her path, awakening. And, if you like what I'm doing here, if you think I'm offering some good topics, if you're learning, do me a favor. Tell a friend, share, like, subscribe to the show. I love your support in this endeavor. I want to keep doing this as long as I can. I am raising the consciousness of this planet every day. I feel it. And I need your help to continue this journey. So, with that, gang, we will see you next week on Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. And welcome to your fate, everyone. See you next week. Journey well. Bye.